even if I schedule my own time off,
Right.
I still have that thought in the back of my head, like, you're not working. You need to be working. You're not making money. Like, this is a problem. And so that's one of those things you have to learn how to control and just say things will be fine.
Welcome to The Deep Dark, a business podcast where we ask seasoned minds to excavate their history, pulling out the best insights, the hardest moments, and yes, golden epiphanies. Somewhere in the stories and laughs, we all get a little smarter and feel a little better about our own business ventures. Remember, if it didn't hurt, it doesn't count. Your hosts are Chris Lyon and Tim Douglas at the Fidelis Creative Agency. So strap in and get ready as we plunge once again into The Deep Dark.
On this episode of The Deep Dark, I'm talking with Chris Salters, owner of Chris Salters, LLC, editing since 2011, providing him the flexibility to live with his family while growing his career. Chris and I discuss running a successful business as the CEO and sole proprietor. Strap in, take a seat, and get ready to plunge into the Deep Dark. Well, welcome to the Deep Dark Podcast. You're here with Chris and Chris today. We're going to have a conversation. Chris, I'm going to jump in and let you kind of tell your story from the get-go and who the audience is talking to or listening to, I'm sorry, and what it's all about. So yeah, once again, let's hear your story, Chris. What do you do and why do you do it?
Sure thing. So these days, I'm a commercial and brand film video editor. I really want to emphasize the commercial and brand film just because video editing in itself is just a very wide gamut of stuff. I mean, I think a lot of people today hear video editing and they think YouTube or movies, and that's it. But it is a whole world of possibilities. Even with the advent of AI and all that kind of stuff, people doing the video editing are going to be around for a long time.
Right.
So I like to work with brands. I like things that are funny. I like to tell stories. Mostly brand films are really what I love to do. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, I mean, that's like a longer form video, anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes long, that, is more about what the heart of the brand is rather than a product itself. And that is, it's fun to cut because it's telling a true story like a little film.
Right. Well, we were stalking your website.
Good.
And man, kind of blown away with the brands that you have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you want to give a little synopsis of your favorites?
So Alienware was a fun one. Did some work with them on a really fun spot where we had a moving camera that involved like about 4 different types of cameras that we all had to mix together, and the camera in the spot never stops moving. It was a big challenge. That was a lot of fun to do. Done a bunch of stuff with Kohler. As well as Mary Kay and FedEx has been a big one lately, and those guys,
Wow.
It's just a great company and a lot of fun to work with.
Yeah. Being able to work with big brands is what many people dream of, right? I think, people think about, hey, here's consistency. Once I get the gig, I'll be able to continue to do the gig, but man, the world will see my work. And that's actually really cool too, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, consistency is it's nice to have the work once it starts coming to you, because when you first set out on your own, you have that I guess the fishing mentality of like, you got to get these cold calls out there, introducing yourself, networking, and with the hope that it's going to come together, because you wouldn't be setting out on your own if you didn't think you had the skills, but then you have the hard task of proving to other people that you know what you're talking about. So yes,
Right.
The consistency is a big thing.
Making that technician to business owner jump is tough, right? So, as we talk about that, and were you like conscious that, being a company that's telling brand stories as you are, and as the owner of this company, were you conscious of how am I going to tell my own brand story? Were you thinking about that the whole time?
Maybe not purposefully. I always wanted to come across professionally, which I think led to doing the same thing. Like one of the things that I always wanted to drive across was I wanted a consistent look around the things that I did. Like when somebody came to my website, I wanted them to feel like this guy was really put together. He knows what he's doing, because that initial impression, I mean, it speaks 1,000 words,
Yeah.
And so I guess in that respect, yes, but I wasn't actively thinking about that. I mean, when I started, I didn't intend on starting a business, and it's only recently that I've really started looking at myself as that way, which I think is a good thing. But originally it was just, I'm going to freelance, cut videos, and try to put food on the table. I mean, that was the goal,
Right. Yeah, that's funny you say that because there's that pivotal moment, right? When you go, wait a second, I'm not just a technician on this. There's a ton more that I need to do, right?
Mhm.
I'm now going to be running a business. And it really doesn't matter whether you're running a business as a sole proprietor, as a sole employee, or if you're running a business otherwise. The only thing that really changes is the number of decimal points, right? Of expenses that you end up with as you grow it.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's kind of where it goes. So tell me, when you started this business, as you went along, tell me what was the first time that you actually said, "Man, this really sucks. I don't know if I want to do this." When was that hard point?
I'll tell you, as far as jumping on the freelance side, this is probably a terrible answer, but I haven't hit that moment from the get-go. Like it
Wow.
was, I have always enjoyed video editing. That's once I kind of found that in college by accident.
Yeah.
It became the thing I wanted to do. And then I have been fortunate enough since I started this company that um, I've been able to get the work, and it might not always
Hmm.
be exactly what I want to do, but the work's coming in and it's in a field that I can, excel at, and be creative and do things, even when it's a mundane corporate video sort of thing. Um, so I've been very fortunate in that respect.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So how many years have you been in business now?
This is big number 5 by myself.
So this is the year you make it over year number 5, owning a business. They
Mhm.
say the rest is gravy, right? They say that if you can pass year number 5, you have survived. 99% of businesses that start will fail by year 5.
Man, this is
So
great. I had no idea that was a saying, so I'm already feeling good right now.
it is, and owning a few businesses myself, I have gone
Mhm.
through the 5-year doldrums. I understand what that is. There's a little of battle fatigue that comes in there as you look at it, but on the other side, something just seems to relieve and just jive right there after that 5-year mark, and
Well,
I
what
can't
I
tell you
found
why.
is that at least for me, I feel like you're almost hitting a stride of like I don't man, there's so many things I don't want to say to
Mhm.
jinx myself here, but it's been easier to get work at this point. I've been out
There you
there
go.
enough. I've established contacts, and my work has started to help get more work. And so,
Hmm.
yes, I still try to do outreach and things of that nature, but for the most part, my work comes by either referrals or repeat clients. And so I'm not like having to scavenge to go get that work. I can do the things that I want to do. And that almost opens you up to the ability to figure out, okay, well, how do I grow this if I want to? Like, I don't really have dreams yet of opening a full post facility, but there are ways as a freelancer, as a solo person, that you can take on
Hmm.
more work and still grow that client base.
Right. I have some really good friends here in town that do exactly what you do, and they have been doing it solo for a long time. I mean,
Sure.
decades, right? I don't know if you know Josh Smith, but he does the
Mhm.
Distinguished Alumni video, and
Okay.
really and truly, I know he has other things he does, but man, does that guy grind. The time he has to spend in the dark in front of 3 screens editing above, once he does get all the film, it's hard work. It's really hard
Absolutely.
work. Yeah,
Yeah.
anybody that tells you you're not hasn't been in those shoes. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the same thing of people who expect artificial intelligence to come and throw together a movie for you. Like, there's
Mm,
more to it than just being able to choose like clips A, B, and C and put them together in the correct order.
right.
There's a lot that goes into it from the creative aspect, but also from a technical aspect. Like, you've got to learn how to deal with all of these file types and things of that nature.
Yeah, but you said something. I want to back up a little bit. You said as soon as you started, you ended up getting sick, right? How
I
how how
did.
did that affect you? Because hey, companies that start out with one person, it all rides on your back, right? It's tough.
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest, so I had quite a few things kind of on my back, I guess, going into when I decided to jump ship. I was working for Texas Christian University, their athletics group at the time, and I had just started their video department. And after 2 years of doing that, I really enjoyed it, but I just felt like I was working too much. I was never home. My wife and I already had one kid, and we had another on the way, and I was just never home because sports never quit. So I got this crazy idea that I was going to start freelancing. I had done it once before for a few months when I was in Los Angeles, and I was like, I could do this again. I can make it work in Dallas. Anyway, so fast forward a little bit, and it gets to be about 2 months before my final day on the job at TCU, and I start feeling I got a headache. And I go through the whole day. I come home, and my wife happens to be out of town, and I'm taking care of my daughter. I'm giving her a bath, and this headache has just gotten progressively worse throughout the day. And to the point that my daughter's in the bathtub and I literally am just laying on the floor listening to her like splash in the water because my head hurts so bad. I'm like, I got to get you in bed. She goes to bed. I immediately go to bed and I wake up in the middle of the night, sweating profusely with a stiff neck. And just from horror stories in college, I knew what those symptoms were.
Right.
I called my wife. I told her, you've got to get home. She was in Austin at the time. So that's a 3 hour drive. So at like 3 a.m., I got her to come home, had to go give my 1 year old child to my neighbor across the street so I could drive myself to the hospital and say, I think I have meningitis. And so sure enough, they do the test, they do a whole spinal tap, and I'm in the hospital for like 3 days. Luckily, it was the
Bacterial.
viral meningitis.
Oh, viral.
Yeah, viral. Viral is the one you want if you have a choice because it doesn't kill you as fast.
Wow.
And so luckily they got in there, everything was fine, and I just had to wait it out. But that was again, 2 months before I went on this job, and then a month or before I went out on my own. And then a month after I left, we had our second child. So that really puts the pressure on you to go out and make some money because you got a family to feed.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. Actually, I've been in those shoes, not with viral meningitis, but when I very first went out on my own, little conversation piece, and this is all about brand and storytelling anyway, but I ended up having an accident working out and I had a resistance band pop and it took out my eyes.
Oh, wow.
And man, I had never done so well. I thought this, I said, I don't know why I hadn't done this before, and doing things on my own, right? Being an entrepreneur. And it had been about 6 months. Truthfully, I mean, the coffers were full. Things were awesome. And then I was blind for 3 months. Right? They didn't know whether it was going to come back. Oh, totally blind. Yeah. So when it happened, it was bad. Actually, it sliced my irises. But as it happened, I ended up not being able to see well, and then it went darker and darker before it went dark. Did the whole hospital thing, and luckily I had a great eye doc, and he was like, "Hey, only time will tell." Right? That's about it. And it was so funny because it was almost well, to a certain extent. I can't see close, so that's why you see me take my glasses on and off. They don't really work at all either. I'm kind of locked in. I can actually see far as clear as anybody you ever saw. I mean, it's great, man. I've got eagle vision that way, but otherwise, yeah, it slowed me down. 3 months laying there in the dark was really no fun. And it was a bit biblical on the other side. It was a Pauline thing is when it came back, it looked like I was looking through fish scales, and then finally it just started to come through.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that I was thinking. I mean, not to what an awesome experience. I mean, definitely not a good one, but
sure,
most people don't have the luxury of coming back from that, having experienced what that, depravity of eyesight and getting that back in any extent. I mean, that's a pretty eye-opening experience. Pardon the pun.
Dump. Yeah, actually, it was life-changing. I've always been a little bit of a hard charger, but I was not as much because I then knew what counted and what didn't.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. It kind of changes your perspective. There you go. Another dad joke, but absolutely, man. Absolutely. So I've been down that road, and I know that it can be scary. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you had to be thinking, well, I hope I clear up from this because my family's depending on me.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other thing in the back of my mind was, all right, they've got to pay me for the vacation I haven't used, so that's going to get me at least 2 weeks,
Yeah. Hopefully I'm better by then, right?
Well, and that's honestly to kind of segue back to what we were talking about. That's something that I've actually never been able to escape. The thought of not being able to provide. Even when especially when you first start out, you have those days of, am I going to get work? Am I going to be able to find a job? Am I going to be able to bring in money? But eventually you do bring in jobs, you do get money, and your family gets food on the table. But then maybe you have a slow period and those thoughts creep back into your head. And it's to the point now that even if I schedule my own time off, like I'm going to take the next week off, 2 weeks off.
Right.
I still have that thought in the back of my head, like, you're not working. You need to be working. You're not making money. Like, this is a problem. And so that's one of those things you have to learn how to control and just say, hush you, like things will be fine.
Right. Well, that is the deep, dark thing we're talking about, man. That's that voice on the inside. It's funny you say that because our mutual friend, Jeff Scheffelbein there, he has a saying that I always go back to, right? I always go back to is don't tell ourselves stories, right? Don't tell yourself a story. And many of those thoughts, we're telling stories to ourselves that are negative, and we don't need them, right? We have no ability to control the future and know what's coming, but man, does it does. It weighs on your shoulders.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt. But inevitably, somehow it always works itself out.
So far it
Yeah.
has. Let's keep
Yeah.
it going.
It's that profit motive, right? If you stay motivated enough, and keep your eyes.
Well, that's the thing. I think you're only in, I mean, there's other stories we could talk about and probably will talk
Sure.
about today, but I mean, so long as you don't quit, you haven't failed. I mean, it's a learning
There you go.
experience, and it might be a deep, dark, long one, but
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you keep going and you can keep that mindset of I just have to go another day, you can hopefully dig yourself out of it.
Well, I think, did somebody tell you that as a truth along the way, or is that something
I'm
you came
sure
to
I'm
yourself?
I'm definitely not philosophic enough to make that up myself. So
Yeah, it's true though. But I think what you're doing there is you're kind of cracking the code, right?
mhm.
And I'm going to get back to brand led companies, but the truth is that when we bring a company in, and we love to start with a brand workshop, to tell you the truth, we're almost to the point where we won't do any work unless we get there first. But as we go through that brand workshop, what we do is inevitably we figure out those pain points, and who you're talking to, how you talk to them. Because one thing that AI will never do for your brand is give it a soul or a life of its own. And we both know that a company, that brand carries a personality, right? It carries values, and AI can't do that for you.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. AI, all that it is doing, and I mean, we definitely don't need to make this an AI conversation, but
Sure.
it's a good tool for, helping speed things along, but all it is doing right now is regurgitating stuff that people have already done before. And yeah, it's putting it
Right.
together in new and interesting and fascinating ways, but it's not making anything new out of that.
Mm-mm.
And that's what you need the people factor for.
That's right. But back to the brand thing. So that's what we do. We dive in and we figure out who you are in that brand, right?
Mhm.
Especially the owner as they go in, because like it or not, you have to ride for that brand and it has to represent you. And if things go well and you are a legacy business and you're not built to sell, you're stuck with it for a long time.
Sure.
So it's really important to represent that as it goes. But so as you go, you crack the code. So as you were going through and you were starting, so what didn't work for you? What did you say? Yep, I've got to pivot. Oh, this isn't working. I mean, there's got to be something there that didn't work.
Right off the bat, I thought when I started freelancing that I was going to do more motion design, like motion graphics, things like that, more on the flashy graphic stuff,
Right.
less video editing, because I knew that there was a market for that. I'd also Joey Korenman, who was he's the founder of School of Motion, which is an online school for learning how to do a lot of motion graphic type work, 3D, After Effects, things like that. I had followed him for a long time and his trajectory. He had written a book back in 2015, somewhere around there, called The Freelance Manifesto. And it was
Okay.
basically his thoughts on this is what I did as a freelancer, how to become a freelancer. And then he ended up owning a studio at one point, or running a studio at least. And he gave that perspective of being a studio owner, what you as a freelancer need to do to get work. And I read this book. It was a very well written book, had a lot of tips, had a lot of practical advice for somebody who was like, I want to take this step, but don't know how to do it. And I was like, I can do all of these things that he's talking about, and I have the skills to back it up. So that's what I want to do. I'm going to be a freelance motion graphics designer. Well, once I got into I guess out on my own, some of that work was there, but I started to realize that there was more of an editing need than I thought there was. And that video editing is my passion. I mean, that's what I consider to be my strength. I'm good at it, and I really wanted to do that. And so that was the first initial pivot, was to not necessarily lose the motion graphics, but really focus on the video editing and have the motion graphics just as a capability I keep on the back pocket, that whenever I have a project come along, that's the differentiator between me and somebody else, is that I can move fluidly between those two things and even integrate them when needed, and give you a product that's hopefully better than what you were expecting in the first place.
Wow. Well, what you're doing is an art. People don't really understand that, but as a business and art usually are two different sides of your brain as you're moving forward, right?
Mhm.
So what is when you were designing your brand and building your site and building your logo and building the persona that the world was doing, when you look at your site now, what was your big motivator? What are you trying to purvey? What are you trying to tell the world as you look at it?
Um, a great question. I kind of go back to what I said earlier in the podcast is I just wanted to look basically like a competent individual. I mean, this is my first time really diving in as a solo entrepreneur, freelance person.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had played with it a little bit again in Los Angeles, but it was a very different setting. This was where I had to present myself as I wanted to be a one-stop shop, almost competing with the post houses that are in Dallas and Fort Worth and Chicago and New York and LA. Like I wanted to be that alternative to a larger group like that for maybe a smaller business where they could go and still get the same results. And in order to do that, I wanted to present myself as such.
Yeah. Well, and I think you do. I mean, the very first thing you see on the site really is really your face, right?
Yes.
So you're leading, that direction. And as it goes, I hear your differentiator. What is it that your market really is looking for when they go and hire a new, lack of a better term, media, film, video editing? What do they look for?
Well, what's interesting is I think it really depends on the client and where they are in the industry, because I work occasionally, not as much as I used to, directly with, brands or clients. Most of the time it's through a studio or agency. And depending on how that agency is structured, most of the time I would say they're looking for somebody who can kind of carry something soup to nuts as far as we can give you this project, trust that you're going to manage it, and be able to take it from, initial idea to final delivery. Now, there's other companies that are on the larger aspect where, you're getting plugged in as a key component, where I'm the editor that I'm working alongside a team of colorists and motion graphics people, as well as producers and executive producers and, directors. And you have to be able to mold yourself to that team, because they're not going to mold themselves around you. You need to be able to fit into that little keyhole. And in order to do that, you've got to have the experience to be able to adapt based on previous experiences you've had, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. So is that working for you? I mean, how's it going? Yeah. Are you growing?
I think it's going great right now. I mean, my goals, I think like most people in this space, are to continue to work with bigger and better brands and just kind of to grow as a name within the industry. Like I would eventually like to get to a point where, talking in editing or creative circles, like, oh, you need to go work with Chris Salters. He is the editor for this type of spot. That's the goal. Right now, as far as work, like I said, I'm able to basically rely on the clients that I've made and the relationships that I've built to bring in that work. And it's been really good.
Yeah. So, one of the hard things, and you said it earlier, was talking referrals, right?
Sure.
So I'm going to jump back into referrals. So we have when we're coming up with a marketing strategy or a number of ways of doing things here, we go to a thing called the go-to-market chart, right? Okay. And so there's certain things we've learned over time with the go-to-market chart, because the whole world, and I'll just bluntly tell you, think that if you put out some digital Facebook ads, somehow your business is going to blow up, and that's absolutely false.
Yep.
That's not going to happen. But what we do know is that somewhere around the $5,600, maybe pushing $7,000 mark for a year-long ticket for a product or service, that right after that, digital marketing stops. It doesn't go, right? And what we do know is when we start to hit the other end of the continuum, where you're talking about somewhere in the market about 50,000 plus, only one thing works, and that's referrals. And so you have to build a marketing strategy that is based upon referrals, right? Sure. So what do you do when do you ask for referrals, or you're just so good people just keep giving them? How does that work? I
mean, when things were slow, when I first started, I would, say, hey, tell your friends if you've got anybody, like I did a good job for you, let them know. And,
yeah.
I don't know how many times that worked, but honestly, one of the best referrals that has come is from networking with peers, honestly. Right. Where I either knew motion graphics people or other editors, and just, we kind of bounce things off of each other, where we have a decent, working relationship. And I'm busy right now. I can't take a job that just came in. Let me point it to this guy because I trust him. He's a good guy. He's going to, do the client well. And that stuff gets reciprocated. I mean, I'm kind of a big believer in karma in that respect. I mean, sure. I want to, and I also want to help, my fellow creatives out there that are out on their own. And hopefully one day that comes back to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, and as far as the other referrals, yeah, I do like to think that, my work is something that speaks. It really is the thing that speaks the most for me, because that's the product that somebody else eventually sees, whether that's the consumer on one end or a client somewhere else. They see that and hopefully want to know who made it and start getting interested. And, if you work backwards, you can figure it out. But that's also the foot that you put forward when you're introducing yourself to other clients.
Yeah. Is that hard for you? I mean, because basically what you're talking about is sales. You're talking about sales.
Oh, I hate it. It's awful. It's funny because my sister, she's in marketing, and her husband, he's a sales guy. And I mean, it comes very naturally to them to be able to talk and have these conversations and just introduce. And I have gotten better at it, I guess, but I've never been much of a chest beater, and that's right. Sort of what you have to do. Nobody else is going to champion you. You have to do it yourself. So you have to walk that line of like showing people what you do, but also being humble about it.
Right.
Oh, because wow, that's tough. Of all the things, and I really want to say this, of all the things that I've made, very few, if any of them, I would probably say none of them, have I done by myself. There has either been somebody there that has created the idea initially, and then I, took it and ran with it, or, I teamed up with a director of photography, or there's a motion graphics person, or I teamed up with another editor, or there's a whole team of people, and I'm just the guy that's putting all the pieces together under some direction, but it's ultimately my hands and my creative that make it one cohesive piece,
Right.
But I mean, in my respect, there's so many people behind me that nobody will ever meet, just because it's a group and it's a team for every individual project.
Yeah. So one of the things, Chris, I didn't tell you, and I won't throw out any names and I won't embarrass anybody, but the person that's producing this podcast right now over to the side is burgeoning on their own creative as well, right? So if you were talking to her, what would you tell her that she needs to know in order to start a business like yours and what it takes to run it?
Start by touching up my face as much as you can before this goes to the internet. But no, I mean, striking out on your own, I think having a plan of what to do when you're not busy. That was the one thing that I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just sitting there twiddling my thumbs. I had a schedule of, I'm either going to learn to try to grow and do add more to my tool belt, or I'm going to spend this time networking and researching companies, and just you got to hustle at the beginning. I mean, there's no way around it.
You got to grind.
Exactly.
There's no way around it. Yeah. One of the things that we say around here quite often, probably not enough, is because everybody loves to have the big rocks, the big things that they're looking at, right? With the big rocks in the jar, and then the goals and where they're coming. But really the success comes from you segmenting your day and grinding on each piece every day, all day, sets and reps. And eventually, just like you said, the phone begins to ring. It becomes that 5-year mark. Yeah, it's consistency.
Well, and I mean, I think that might be a hard thing for some people. I've always been very, my wife says I have a good work ethic. I might call it a workaholic problem. But so I've never had the issue of like, oh, I'm home by myself, let me go watch TV and sit on the couch all day. Like it's either a guilty conscience or what. Like I got to be doing something. And so I guess that's kind of to go along with like the branded identity. I mean, when I jumped into this, like it's a job. Like, I mean, I might not be at my desk, for a full 8 hours, but I'm going to be available, and I'm going to be focusing on the work that I'm supposed to be doing, even if that's just networking that day.
Well, and just networking is hard work.
It is. It is not to, belittle that.
No. I'm actually saying it more for the audience, because a lot of people don't understand what it takes to do that correctly. It's exhausting, right? Especially if you're not geared that way.
Yeah, if it doesn't come naturally, it is an awkward experience. You kind of have to work your way through and find people to help.
Yeah. So when you were getting started, was there a magic handshake? Was there somebody that came along and you shook their hand and there goes your business? Yeah. What was that?
100%. Like I said, and this kind of alludes to your very first question, I never had that really difficult, like, oh, is this going to work or not moment. Because right before I left TCU, amongst the meningitis and babies and all that kind of stuff, I had crossed paths with a group in Dallas, a studio called Name Tag Films. and they needed some footage that we had shot within the athletics department. And so I was coordinating with them, but I'm also like 2 months out from not having a job. And I was like, oh, by the way, if you're looking for an editor, this is what I do. Would love to meet with you. And one thing led to another. Like I had already set myself up with reels and websites. And so I just set that to them. And one thing led to another. And I had a meeting with them within like a week or two after I quit my job. And it was just an initial, get to know you sort of thing. But I met with the two directors of the company and the executive producer. And they're like, all right, well, hey, you kind of have the right, culture fit here, I think. We're going to give you just a couple of test things that we wanted to do on the back end anyway. So let's see what you can do and it'll go from there. And luckily, they liked what I did. They liked working with me and they kept me fed for the most part for the first 2 to 3 years of my business. And I was pulling in other clients at the time, but they were my main focus. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the key. So yeah, what I'm getting to is a point that I'm trying to drive home. So there is a sequence of events that before you jump and try to start a business that really has to happen. And by the way, I'm always going to go back to most people think that when their business isn't going well, they have a sales problem, and it's probably a marketing problem. But when it really starts is that you have to have set some groundwork. There has to be relationships out there. You have to have a network. You have to have something same thing happened to me when I decided to leave a very good executive marketing position. It's because a person that I was in grad school with decided to give me a ring and said, "Hey, I've got a problem. Can you come fix it?" Right. But we want you to, not who you're working for.
Sure.
And that was the beginning of the entrepreneur. Well, I've always been an entrepreneur, side hustle, but as it goes, that was the beginning, but you kind of have to have that set out. You have to have a vision of where it's going. So what's your vision? You've been at it 5 years. Where are you going to be 5 years from now?
Man, that's a great question. It's something that I've actually been struggling with recently. Just like, where does this go? Because, you hit a moment. I actually hit this sort of early on after the second year mark. I'd already exceeded the salary cap I had at my previous job. Like I was bringing in more money. I was enjoying what I was doing, but I also didn't know what the next rung on the ladder was. Because when you're in corporate America or whatever that looks like in the collegiate world, or even working in Hollywood, you have that next step. You go from editor to senior editor to creative director to whatever it may be, whatever hat that might be. And when you're out on your own, those rungs on the ladder don't exist. It's whatever you want them to be, which can be a very scary thing. Back a few years ago, when I initially had that thing happen, I tried to scratch an itch and did like a YouTube creator sort of thing, like I wouldn't call it a side hustle, but more of I wanted to see if I could make a channel, and it worked. I've got about 4,000 subscribers, and it teaches video editing techniques and things like that. But what I found through that little exploration was I really preferred to do the work that I wanted to do, like for the brands, not trying to hustle to beat an algorithm. That wasn't for me. So it's still on the back burner. I do things with it occasionally, but my focus is on the brand work that I do now. And to answer your question about 5 years from now, again, I hope that I've just grown as an editor to have a larger network of people, and I'm getting, requests to work on bigger and bigger projects. I mean, I would say probably the holy grail is, working on a commercial, Super Bowl commercial, at some point in the future. Like that's a cool like thing to achieve. But even with that, it comes with its own negatives because, when people are paying $5 million for a 30-second spot, it's not just the editor or the creative director making the decisions. There's going to be a bunch of cooks in the kitchen, and so that's something that you have to learn to deal with whenever you have all of these opinions and things coming in, as well as, rounds and rounds of revisions that you're going to have to learn to deal with. And that's something you have to grow into and learn how to adapt to and be willing to kind of set aside your own ideas in order to embrace what's best for the brand and what the person who's writing the check at the end of the day wants.
Well, and the other side of that is you start hitting those kinds of numbers and that size, and you may end up with more than one of them when you do well, right?
Sure.
And then when that happens, you've got to scale. You've got to take on employees, right?
Exactly.
There's no way for you to do it on your own eventually. And
I'm sort of in that kind of in-between phase right now, kind of like what we said earlier. There's ways to grow as an individual. And so I've set up a whole server system in my home office where I have remote editors that can come in no matter where they are in the country or the world, and they can help me assist where they can, either get an edit kicked off and then I can pick it back up and, finish it, give it the Chris Salters touch that the clients want. Or, maybe they do just the work at the beginning of organizing footage, things that would take up my time where I could be creative and making for a client. I can pass it off and make it faster when the right project reveals itself. And I can see how that has the legs to grow into something bigger.
Right.
It's making that decision of, do I want that, or am I happy with where things are?
There you go. Yeah, I mean, because it's going to come whether you want it to or not. You continue to grind and you continue to put out a good product, whether you want it to or not. Those opportunities will show themselves.
Well, and it's how you deal with it, And
Yeah.
I think one of the big things that you have to learn is, I guess, in my perspective, I'm not thinking just about myself here. Like, yeah, I've got these aspirations of things that I want to do and make, but I also, my kids already think I work too much, which is funny because I'm home all the time. But I want to be there for them. Like, it's not cool to be like, hey, I'm not going to swim lessons with you because, I got to work. That's okay to happen occasionally, but when that's life,
Right.
like, they're going to be the people that remember that in the future, not the people you were doing the work for. And that's something I
There you
constantly
go.
try to remind myself.
Yeah, that ability. The one thing that I find, and I'll ask this of you, is was it hard to learn to say no?
Absolutely. Especially when, I guess, are you familiar with the phrase niching down?
Yes. Yes.
So everybody kind of tells you that you're either of one school of thought of you are a specialist or you're a generalist. And when I first started, I'm taking the generalist approach because that brings in, more opportunity. I can do motion graphics, I can do color, I can do editing. Like, you can do all these things. Great. But nobody knows you for one specific thing. And that in my experience has been what people come to me for. And at one point I finally decided I want to be an editor, but not just an editor. More specifically, I want to focus on commercials, brand films, things that tell stories. And that's what I want people to come to me for.
Right.
And so that it takes a lot of, I don't want to say gumption because I feel like I'm patting myself on my back, but at some point, when you're turning down a paid opportunity for the chance to bring something in that you're more focused on that you don't know exists yet, but hope that it comes in, that it's a scary step. But once you do that, you get more comfortable with it. And in my experience so far, it has been a good thing.
Yeah, it's tough. We when I say we, Fidelis as a whole, we're finding it over and over. The world's different post-COVID in many ways. And there is still a little bit of frantic panic in order to make businesses work, right? I think that it's some muscle memory that has stemmed from COVID. And so what happened was, after that, many companies, there was two types of CEOs. There was one that dug the hole, let the problem happen, and then got back out otherwise and tried to figure it out. Most of those still aren't around. But then there was the other company who just went ahead and pointed azimuth and went and continued to work their way through it. They seem to do better, but they did exactly what you just articulated, which was they became generalists. We call it here, they began to mow yards. Right. So whatever came to them that would make money, they began to do just to keep it alive. And hey, love that about them. But now what's happened is, since we're out of it and many of our companies are doing better, once we finish that marketing workshop, one of the main goals that we're hearing over and over is that we want to be able to choose our client. We want to be able to change or to substitute our clients in kind, right? So we want to make the same amount of money or get better, but those clients that don't fit our values or don't fit what we're doing, we're ready to let them loose. And it's not because they, want to do crazy stuff. It's just simply because our business works better.
Yeah, it doesn't fit. Sure.
Yeah. But to say no is difficult.
But, and at the same time, I also don't view it as a black and white thing. Like that is my preference. That's what I shoot for. But I think you still have to have the flexibility to be able to open up to other possibilities when they present themselves. Sometimes it might make sense, but most of the time it doesn't. I think you have that kind of that goalpost that you're shooting for, and as long as you're headed that direction, you're doing the right thing. And every now and then it's okay to kind of weave a little bit as long as you get back on track.
Right. So when you're making those decisions of the CEO of your business, when you're doing that and the email comes in and you say to your wife, hey, this is the perfect client, Well, who is that perfect client for you? And hey, this is shameless, right? We're on here so they know, but let the world know, who is your perfect client.
No, absolutely. I had a lot of fun with a group called Art Class, and they were Kansas City based for a while. I think they're out of LA now. They're kind of jumping on the coasts, but they worked on a lot of big projects, and I was lucky enough to get pulled in by accident. They just needed an editor to be on set one day in a local shoot in Dallas, and at the end of the shoot, I was like, also, guys, I know how to actually edit, not just copy and paste files.
Right.
And
Right.
one thing led to another, and I worked for them for about a year and a half, on and off, freelancing. But they were great just because it was one of those situations where you jumped into a big team. And as a solo person, I really enjoy getting back into that team environment whenever it exists. And so being able to work with, the producer and the EP, and then, the motion graphics guys and everybody else that's involved in a production, it was nice to have that teamwork behind you. And so that was cool. So I really enjoy those settings. At the same time, I also, I guess last year, through an old contact that I had in Los Angeles, I got hooked back up with an old producer I had worked with, and we put together the making of, it was a 30-minute documentary for the animated Pinocchio film that Guillermo del Toro made for Netflix. It won the Academy Award for Best Animated Film. The documentary did not, but it was an excellent documentary, even if I did help make it. But it was one of those opportunities that it was awesome because of the person I was working with. The producer's amazing, and he was definitely the guiding creative light through that whole process. But just our relationship together, it made it enjoyable. Like, he was somebody I enjoyed working through problems with, and at the end of the day, I made this really cool thing that's now publicly available to anybody that watches Netflix.
That's pretty neat. Man, and to know your client is important, right? And
Yes.
to know who you are in your business, and for them to know you. So, and you talked about what it looks like in the future and the kind of stuff that you want to do. So this is the deep dark question at the end, right? Of
Okay.
As we talk. So the bigger question is, you have finished working, and after you finish working, you're at your funeral and everybody is there. What are they going to say about you? What do you want them to say? Let me say that. Yeah.
I mean, if that happened right now, I think one, they would say he worked too much. So that's something I want to work on. And then the other, I really think that people would say that I was a good person, as far as I try to do the right thing. I want to do what's right, no matter if that's the hard thing to do. And sometimes that comes with, if you're talking business, that's giving the client more than what they asked for. Other times it's just making sure that, maybe taking care of a client is telling them you're not the right person for this job, and getting that to somebody else so that they can get taken care of as best as they can. That's a pretty deep question. I also hope that somewhere in there, it talks about that I cared for my family. I have two little girls that are just the lights of my life, even when they're driving me absolutely up the wall. I've got a beautiful and understanding wife that just tolerates my business, and then yeah.
It is a deep question, and it's funny because not all our business owners answer the same. And as they come through, there is a certain consistency through there. Probably most all of our business owners that come through this podcast will tell you, well, they're going to say I worked too much, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be, there is no such thing as work-life balance anymore. That's just the world we live in, right? We have to figure out how to spin a lot of plates, and that's true. So take it easy on yourself. But yeah, it is a truth. But what we're trying to do here is just to point people to your business, how you handle things, why you can be trusted, why your brand is important. And even if, it sounds like the majority of everything you do is B2B for sure. If that's happening, then, why is it that they're going to call you? So tell us, how do they get a hold of you?
So easiest thing to do is just go to my website, and that is chrissalters.com. And on there's contact page. My email's on there, and that's chris@chrissalters.com, because I like my name. Pretty easy.
Because you know what's going to happen now, Chris, all the people that are here in the homeland,
yes,
without us, giving them all the credit in the world, but they're going to listen to this and they're going to know, because it is, man, that's big business around this joint, man.
Hey man, the Aggie Network is a big thing.
The Aggie network it's gigantic, right? It's huge.
That's right.
And I won't argue that it drives our business, man. It sure
You know,
does.
can I say one more thing that this is
Sure.
popping in my head here at the end, and it's way off topic, but one of the things I guess I'm thinking about Macy, I assume that's who you were talking about starting
Yeah.
her own.
Yeah.
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 One of the things when as a freelancer that I don't see a lot is people advertising, doing the marketing. And that's one of the things that I've done from day one
Wow.
is spend a little money up front in the hopes that I, can make some new clients. And at first, I made enough to basically pay for what I spent in the advertising. But as I've kept up with it, I've gotten repeat business from those clients. And there's no doubt that I'm getting money back, even though I set that aside in the business in the beginning.
Right.
And I mean, just simple things like a little bit of money on Google Ads and like maybe specific, like, I don't even know what to call this place, but there's a group called Production Hub that anybody who's looking to make videos or, maybe they need a crew for something or they need an editor or whatever it may be, they can go there and search for them in a city and state. I put, a little bit into that.
Right.
And through those two places, it's helped bring in some work that I wouldn't otherwise find.
I'm so glad that you went there because we talk about this so often and businesses come in and I've got a saying that a business with no sign is a sign of no business.
Sure.
And so, take that as you will, but that really points to that advertising piece, right? So as they're coming in, we're talking over it many times in that initial conversation, it always goes to pain. And they're like, well, the problem is I've got a great product. And, the truth is that they need to, look good, sound right, and drive revenue. But that's where we help them. But as that goes, they can't figure out why the phone's not ringing.
Sure.
Because they can't get through the noise. Because
send out the smoke signals. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to do it. And so we talk about, the whole everything that it takes to get them there, which many people, often have, they're very wide eyed at the end of that going, wow, this is that. And we point, this is why your competitor's killing it, right? This is what it looks like. But you're right. You at the very first, you have to lead with brand. You have to advertise. You have to make sure that you're in the right spot and that you look good, you sound right, and then you'll drive revenue.
Yep,
but it just
doesn't matter
takes
how big you are, even as a
no
solo
matter how
person.
big.
Those are important things.
Yeah. But we can look at everybody's, favorite brands. That's where they started at one point in time, is sinking their money into letting the world know they exist.
Yep.
It just works. Yeah, that's how it works, man. And that's the fun part. It is creative and it's good. And using products like the one and services that you produce, right? It changes minds. It sure does.
That's the goal. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, Chris, I appreciate your time.
No, thank you guys for having me.
All right.